So I came across a surprising article yesterday that's causing a bit of a ruckus in the UK investing community and could spell the end of fractional shares for anyone investing in a stocks and shares ISA. As you'd expect, the article title is a bit sensationalised, but it seems to be suggesting that UK investing platforms offering fractional shares are flouting the 1998 ISA regulations. And in the article itself, HMRC seemed to have confirmed that investors are not allowed to hold fractional shares in ISAs because the tax office only recognises full shares for tax purposes. And it goes on to say that it's HMRC's view that shares as referred to in those regulations relates only to whole shares and not parts thereof. Therefore, any fractional shares cannot be held in an ISA. According to HMRC, a fractional share is not a qualifying investment under the ISA regulations because it's not a whole share and therefore it wouldn't benefit from the tax wrapper status that an ISA provides. I'm not a lawyer or a tax professional, so there's probably way more technical analysis that could go into why fractional shares aren't recognised in the same way that whole shares are. But from what I can gather, HMRC are very unhappy with how some UK investing platforms have interpreted the technical definition of a share. But I don't think there's any need for mass panic amongst ISA holders, and that includes myself. If HMRC's definition of a share is enforced, then it's really unlikely this would null and void your entire ISA account if it held fractional shares. My hope is that if HMRC do win this battle, it will only relate to the fractional parts of a holding. So for example, if you held 5.5 shares in Google, only the 0.5 part of your holding might need to be moved or rebought into a general investment account and be liable for capital gains tax. Personally, I think this news is a bit disappointing because fractional shares really have been a unique selling point for a lot of the newer investing platforms that kind of established themselves in the last 15 years or so. In the comparison video I did on stocks and shares ISAs a few months ago, I highlighted which platforms allowed fractional shares and which ones didn't. And I even used this as a basis for choosing my own ISA this tax year with Trading 212. I think fractional shares are great because they lower the barrier to entry for beginner investors or those with limited capital. So it is a bit of a shame that they're now being called into question and there's some uncertainty about their future. It is quite strange though that HMRC are only bringing this to light now, as fractional shares have been around for many years and there are quite a few platforms that allow investors to buy shares in this way. I expect there will be a bit of a backlash from investment platforms. Freetrade's position seems to be business as usual at the moment, but they have stated that they will ensure none of their customers are financially disadvantaged regardless of what happens. They don't think that current ISA rules prohibit fractional shares from being held in an ISA, but welcome open dialogue with HMRC to try and reach a sensible conclusion. This just goes to show how ambiguous tax regulations can be, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens going forward. Trading 212 don't seem to have released any guidance on this yet, but in the Trading 212 news community, there have been quite a few reports of investors being forced to sell certain investments in their ISAs because they did not satisfy HMRC ISA eligibility criteria, and they're being given until 7th of July to sell up. Now, I'm not sure if this relates directly to yesterday's news or it could be a completely unrelated issue, but it's definitely something I'll be monitoring over the coming weeks. It's unclear what specific action HMRC will be taking going forward, as they've neither confirmed or denied it is currently investigating any stockbroking platforms selling fractional shares for ISAs. But if HMRC do decide to pursue this further and it does end up going to court, my hope is that common sense will prevail over this technicality. I think the key takeaway is not to make any rash decisions based on one potentially overinflated article. Some interesting points have been raised though that could affect a lot of UK investors, so it's definitely something I'll be keeping a close eye on. At the end of the day, I don't think investing platforms are cheating investors by offering fractional shares. It's quite the opposite, in fact. And from what I can see, it's a win-win situation for both parties. Also, fractional shares have been well advertised and in plain sight for many years now, so it's not as if they were ever a big dirty secret. I'd be really intrigued to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below. I know there are quite a lot of ISA investors out there that stick with the more well-established platforms like the Vanguards and the Hargreaves Lansdowns of the world to avoid potential issues like this. Or maybe you see this as purely an HMRC or government regulation issue and think their time could be better spent pursuing more serious tax problems. Time will only tell, so I guess we'll see what the future holds. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.